Scene 2. We start off in some kind of a throne room in the midst of Castle Elsinore. We meet King Claudius, Queen Gertrude, his council, a bunch of background players basically who are there to look important. Polonius, who's an interesting character and also chief advisor. In fact, is really the way the play is set up, the only advisor to the king. And Polonius is one of Polonius's two children, Laertes, along with Hamlet and a couple of other folks. So, King Claudius, one thing you should note about him, he's politically savvy. He begins by making some comparisons here between grief and happiness, death and joy. He compares, he knows that he's got to kind of not ignore the fact of his brother's recent passing and also not seem too happy about recently being married and gaining the throne. So this is a king who's probably not certain of his popularity and is kind of like Aaron Burr in the Hamilton musical, weighing all his options before generally taking too much of a side. But he's pretty image conscious for a guy who went and married his brother's widowed sister. As he describes the situation that he's in and tries to act about it in a tactful way, he mentions the situation with our neighbor Prince Fortinbras to the north, the Prince of Norway, who's causing trouble and potentially threatening this country, Denmark. The audio version of the Scene 2 frame is nice because it gives us some of the way that Claudius feels about Prince Fortinbras, especially with the delivery of the line, "So much for him," right around here on line 25. But everything from around here through here is just his description of what's going on with Fortinbras and what he seems to be planning on doing to Denmark. Spoiler alert, it's nothing good. So what Claudius is going to describe here is his plan. Not only are we going to try to take care of the Fortinbras situation, but we're going to do it by writing to the current king, who is, and this may sound familiar to you, the uncle of Fortinbras, who is now king, right? And he is old and impotent and bedridden, and he's not paying attention to stuff going on in his kingdom. But he should know that, well, his nephew is running around taxing people, raising funds to build an army, and generally stirring up trouble. And because of that, we're sending these two fellas, not very important people, but they're ambassadors, Cornelius and Voltimand, deliver this message to the uncle, whom they call King of Norway, and ask him to tell the nephew to knock it off. They'll be back later. Not a huge plot point, but know that Claudius is trying to handle his business up there with their northern borders. After that, he turns to Polonius' son, Laertes. Laertes, young man, probably around Hamlet's age, goes to college in France, and is the son to Polonius, the chief advisor of the king, but presumably not a long-time advisor, because the way the king treats Laertes is almost suspiciously nice. Like, the way he describes all this is just told in really flowery, praising language, like, whatever you want, nothing you ask will be too big for me. Ask me anything and I'll grant it to you. And Laertes takes this blank check and says, I just want to go back to France to finish up college. And the king asks, you got your daddy's permission? And Polonius says, yeah, I mean, I didn't want him to go because I love my kid, but he can go. And King's like, that's cool. Now, my cousin Hamlet and my son, Hamlet has some world-class shade going along right around this section here. As the king starts to talk to him, the queen jumps in, Hamlet's mom, to say, hey, stop mourning your dead father. Stop, don't look, don't always seek for him in the dust. Know that it's common. Everyone dies. It happens to everyone. And Hamlet, because he's huge on the wordplay, uses common in another way. Probably like common as in classless, right? Yes, mom, completely classless. That dad died, and then you went and married somebody else, his brother, in a short time afterwards. She reads this as a literal line and says, well, if you agree it's common, then why does it seem to be bothering you so much? So he plays, not plays, he just pounces on the word seems here and calls out, well, really everyone else's actions and their lack of grief in comparison to him. He says, I'm not playing, I'm really grieving over this. This section here, page 27 of the text, lines 90 through here, tells us a lot about King Claudius and basically his lack of sympathy and understanding for Hamlet's suffering. He says that his grief is unmanly, it shows an impatient mind and unschooled understanding, basically that Hamlet's weak and immature and stupid and, poo-poo faced for not getting over his dad's death sooner. After he's gone ahead and insulted him as such, he then says, oh, but, we beg you, get rid of this sadness and think of us as dad. Right? Like, we'll be your dad after we've made you feel terrible. This is an important note politically. Again, with Claudius, we always got to keep in mind that image and his PR in terms of the effects of his actions. So he says, let the world take note. Remember, he's in the throne room. He's describing to the courtiers around him. You are the most immediate to our throne. He's making this public proclamation. Hamlet's next in line for the throne, like potentially defusing any ambitions that Hamlet may have felt disappointed by being skipped over when Claudius cut in line by cutting into bed, and also kind of reestablishing publicly the bond of affection between them. This is my heir. I'm not going to make him somebody else who's out of the line of succession. He's next in line for there. Oh, by the way, your request to go back to college in Germany? No, I'm going to deny that. I want you to stay here. So note this in direct contrast to Laertes and the free reign he had. Queen says, yeah, please, stay with us. Hamlet tries to obey. King makes a reference to, that's awesome, that makes me happy. We're going to party, let's fire some cannons into the air and drink. And this seems to be another character trait of him, like he's really happy about being able to celebrate as a king. The first of Hamlet's soliloquies begin here, and this is emo Hamlet. After we went from salty Holden Caulfield-like Hamlet, this one is basically, oh, woe is me. I wish I could melt away. I wish I could die. Life is terrible. The world is an unweeded garden. My father is just 2 months dead, not even 2 months dead. Timing is interesting to note because Hamlet's going to be inconsistent about this throughout the rest of the play. Like, we don't know if it's actually 2 months or if it's longer than that or much shorter than that. He's all over the place with the timing. Whatever it is, we know it's too soon, at least by his standards. And he describes how Mom, Gertrude, used to really adore King Hamlet, but then suddenly, once he dies, she just jumps all away from that and marries Uncle, like faster than even an animal would have. Like an animal that doesn't even have the ability to reason would have mourned longer for their dead mate than she did. So he finishes feeling sorry for himself because he sees Horatio, Marcellus, and Bernardo approach. This version of this has the two friends greeting each other. Apparently Hamlet has not seen Horatio. It's a very warm greeting, but then a suspicious question from Hamlet, like, why are you here from Wittenberg? And before you start judging him for being paranoid, you'll note that in the rest of the play, he has good reason to be suspicious. Horatio makes a joke about being a person who plays hooky. Hamlet says, no way, don't sully your own reputation like that. But really, again, why are you here in Elsinore? And Horatio is that rare person. He's like the only person in the whole play who acknowledges, I'm here for your dad's funeral. And Hamlet takes this with a kind of black humor, saying, don't mock me. Are you sure you weren't here for Mom's wedding? Horatio, again, acknowledges how close the two were in succession to each other. This is unusual in contrast to every other character in the play. Hamlet makes a joke about saving costs there, and then tells Horatio that, I think I see my father, which has got to prick Horatio's interest up. Like, he's probably thinking, like, what, did the ghost appear again? And Hamlet says, oh, I see him in my mind's eye, in my imagination. Which brings Horatio the most wonderful transition and segue possible, where he says, I think I saw your dad last night. And he introduces him to the concept that Dad's ghost may be wandering the halls of the castle late at night. They eventually after describing what happens, agree that this night Hamlet's going to go with Horatio and the guards and check out what's going on with Ghost Dad and see if that's really Dad or not. He does a few checks to make sure that this seems like his dad, but you can read most of those descriptions and details within the Spark Notes there. The end of this section has Hamlet basically saying, "All right, that's cool. I'll see you guys tonight," and then we're left with this kind of note to self, this personal aside, where he's left with a bad feeling about all of this.